Good morning, world.
Good morning. Well, we celebrate Easter. We celebrate Christmas. But today we're going to talk about the most important holiday that's going to supersede all holidays. June 19th, otherwise known as
Juneteenth.
I'm Cedric.
And I'm Brian, and this is Cedric and Brian.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is been a long time. Brian, welcome back from Nashville, Tennessee, once again.
The free state of Tennessee.
Got to feel good, huh?
To be back or to be gone?
Both.
Yeah, we had a good time. We had a really good time. And it was interesting coming back to California now that the mask mandate is off. Because I was in Tennessee where you really didn't wear masks anymore anywhere, and you were packed in. But California's loosening up, at least our town.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And it was irritating because we've missed a lot of things that have gone on in the world. We've missed, Kamala not going to Europe, and we've missed a lot of things, and we couldn't do those things because Brian was gone for 2 weeks, and so we had to do some filler videos, and we hope you guys enjoyed those as we talked about Googling weird stuff and things.
And our comments, our nasty comments,
things like that. But we're back in the saddle again. Brian's refreshed. I'm refreshed. Although I haven't shaved, it doesn't look like it.
Me either.
But we're a little late on this, but I thought we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the new federal holiday, Juneteenth. A lot of people don't know this, but Gordon Granger, a white man, rode into Galveston, Texas, and let the slaves know in Galveston, Texas that they had been freed, that they had been emancipated, because they were back there doing whatever they were doing, picking and whatnot. And he says, "Hey, you guys stop, put those down. You're free." And they're like, "What?"
They didn't have the internet back then.
They didn't have the internet. They can be texted because their democratic, that's very important to remember, their democratic masters accidentally forgot to tell them.
Accidentally.
So they kept working for another 2 years. And so that's why we have a Juneteenth, even though Abe Lincoln, a Republican president, had done it back on January 1st of 1865.
So It took about 6 months for it to get to Texas, apparently.
Yeah. Snail mail at its best right there.
I didn't know. I'd never heard the term Juneteenth up until about a couple of years ago, right? And then I kind of learned what it was. And here's what I see on both sides going on. And my brother-in-law said, "Hey, I didn't know what Juneteenth was until 2 years ago. Now I know what it is." Why would anybody be against it being a holiday?
Well, I don't think people are against it being a holiday because the emancipation, the freedom of slaves should be celebrated. I don't think you can find anyone who's going to disagree with that. And not to draw a correlation between this, just like you couldn't find too many people who weren't against the fact that what happened to George Floyd was a very egregious act. You're not going to find too many people who are against it. It's the fact that they're trying to make it this federal holiday and call it an Independence Day, so to speak. We already have an Independence Day. It's July 4th of 1776. That's when we as Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, that's when we celebrate this country's freedom. Is it important to celebrate the freedom from slavery? Absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt. But it's that Houdini trick again that the left is doing, where they're trying to distract us and say, look over here, while we ignore the real problems. And this isn't a really big issue, but for those you don't know, President Trump actually tried to pass this when he was in office, but it was turned down by the Dems.
No, some Republicans didn't want to do it, but for the same reason that some of them now, because all the Senate voted for it.
Right.
But some people in the House didn't vote for it on the Republican side. But again, and that's my question to you, I'm a little ignorant about this. Why are we pushing for the final date Texas did, and not January 1st or 2nd, because maybe the 1st because that's New Year, when Abe Lincoln actually signed it? Why are we doing it in June, not in January?
It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know, because we were watching this a few days later after Father's Day, and I think that drives a very rich analogy for what I'm going to say next. For those of you who are dads out there, and maybe you did this, maybe you didn't, did you celebrate the day you found out you were going to become a father, or did you celebrate the day you became a father? Now, I can't remember the date, and maybe because, when Brian and I, when we started having kids, not with each other, but with our respective wives, when she came and told me that, hey, I'm pregnant, was that a glorious day? It was an incredible day. It was an awesome day. I was elated, but I can't tell you that date.
Right.
I can tell you, you can wake me up out of a dead sleep, and I can remember October 1st, 1992, because that was the day that I became a father for the first time. Again, I think it's just a distraction tactic that's used by the left to take off what's really going on in this country, because they passed that in just a few short days.
Yeah, so that was my other question. I think it passed in 3 days. Obama was president for 8 years. He had the Senate and House for 2 of those first 2 years. Why didn't Obama pass? Again, I hadn't heard of it back then.
Right.
Obviously, President Obama must have heard about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Why didn't he bring it up then?
Well, I think because, I'm going to go on a limb here and say, well, maybe because he was not really a descendant of slavery. I think Obama was a descendant of slave traders. So it's kind of hard to celebrate something and revel in something when you weren't really a part of it.
I guess. But he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
He was the first black president besides Clinton.
Yeah.
You would think that if it was such an important date, then why, when the black president was president, why wasn't it brought up then? It just seems weird that everything, we had COVID, we had Floyd, we had all this stuff happen so fast. It's just being all compressed into one thing.
Well, it's throwing Black America a bone. It's saying, here, we're going to do this for you, along with giving you a few pennies in the stimulus check. We're going to give you this national holiday. And again, it's just my opinion. It's going to be viewed very much like Cinco de Mayo. What do we do during Cinco de Mayo? We eat a bunch of nachos and chips and we drink margarita. It's not really a day you celebrate anything. And June 19th is going to be very similar, because just because you're white, there's a lot of black Americans who really didn't know what Juneteenth was all about. But now it's like...
But be honest, did you know when you were a kid what Juneteenth was?
No.
Yeah. When did you first learn that term?
Maybe 9-10 years ago. But it wasn't anything that was to be talked about. It was no big deal. And a lot of this stuff is...
But you had heard of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yes. Because that was the day that we were freed, that blacks were freed. But to me, it's kind of like the old Trojan horse trick. And I'm going to draw a few comparisons here. There are things that are packaged very nicely and very pretty, so you can look at them and say, oh, isn't this great? Isn't this awesome what they're doing for us? Like last summer, and I got this a lot, so I'm talking to you as a black male. People said to me a lot, like, oh, Cedric, you don't believe that Black Lives Matter. Of course I believe that Black Lives Matter. But it was wrapped in this pretty little bow called BLM. So the trick was to make me feel bad if I said I didn't support it. And my answer was always the same. It says, of course I support Black lives. I don't support this organization that is stealing money from people that we still don't know where it's gone to.
Yeah, and we've talked about that over and over, that the fundamentals of that organization is more Marxist than has anything to do with Black lives. Because again, they don't care about the huge increase in murders in cities like Chicago of black men or black people.
Yeah, and along with the pretty bow of BLM, it's also just recently, and me and Brian have been getting a ton of comments on our critical race theory video. That has been a hot topic for weeks now.
Yes.
And people will say, we get it in our comment section a lot. You can kind of see the shoulder shrug in people when they leave the comment. They're like, why do you guys have such a big problem with teaching people the truth about our country? Now, was slavery part of our history? Absolutely. And I think it should be taught that. And we were taught that.
We've all been taught that.
They should be taught that. Absolutely, beyond the shadow of doubt. Critical race theory takes it beyond that, and this is the Trojan horse part of CRT. It goes on to tell you that if you are black, you are oppressed. And if you are white, you are an oppressor. And you cannot get ahead. And there's nothing that you can do to get ahead. So again, it creates this divisive tactic that they use to keep us pulled apart.
And that was my next point. Do you think this Juneteenth is going to be unifying or divisive?
It's going to be divisive. It's going to be divisive. Because I know some friends are actually saying like, oh my goodness, I didn't know Juneteenth had an actual flag. We have a flag. We tried to push the whole BLM flag. We keep having all these separate flags. We have a flag with the stars and stripes. This is our flag for blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, people who come over to this country as immigrants who want to make a better life for their families. That is the flag. We don't need 20 different flags. And now Juneteenth has their own flag. And it's just another divisive tactic. And personal story, and people say, I know someone left a comment, I forgot what they said exactly, and they were making fun of me, and they said the black guy doesn't even realize that what his grandparents had to go through. My grandparents went through crap. I'll be the first one to admit it. My grandmother cleaned houses for white people for a living. And my grandmother told me to this day that when my maternal grandmother moved from Alabama out here to California, the lady that she cleaned houses for, they became great friends. Mm-hmm. And they stayed in touch, and they exchanged Christmas cards and Easter cards and birthday cards. And that's what happened. And then my parents went through stuff. But here's the thing. I am not, in 2021, I am not going through what my grandparents went through. I'm not going through what my parents are going through. And CRT is trying to take you back to that Jim Crow era of 1967, 1968, where things were just so bad for black people. And then the difference between racism. Is there racism out there? Absolutely.
Always be racist.
Yeah. Do black people hate white people for some reason? Yes. Do white people not like black people for some reason? Yes. But that is more of a thing in someone's mind where they don't like someone else for another reason.
And they're racist. Just because there are racists doesn't mean there's systemic racism. And we made laws in the 60s to make sure that we outlawed that. So systemically, you can find a good lawyer, and if you think somebody is systemically racist against you, you have a case. You cannot take what's in somebody's heart. If there's a racist person, I think LeBron James is a racist. Yeah. Everything he seems to says is a racist. Yes, he's one of the most honored people on the planet just because he can play basketball well.
Right.
But he is he came out and said he doesn't like white people right at the beginning.
Right.
So how come we can honor him, a racist? Nick Cannon came out, said terrible racist and anti-Semitic things. He still has a show. And going back to Cedric's point real quick here is, when I was growing up and we were taught about slavery and I saw Roots, I had this visceral hate, and I kind of tied it to the whole Holocaust thing just because of where my family came from. Mm. It's like I couldn't believe how horrible it was, and it made me empathize, it made me angry. But you know what's happening now? By teaching white kids, instead of teaching them about the history, but teaching them that they're oppressors, you are creating racists right now as we're moving along. And I see this, and you can see it on social media. People that probably wouldn't have been racist at all, they would have just thought, all people are equal. Yeah, maybe that person looks different than me, and I never met a black person or a Jewish person. In the old days, it would be you learn to learn about their culture. Right. You meet people.
Right.
Now, they're creating such a divide that now you're creating people that are being taught something that's making them feel bad about themselves. And you know what happens when you feel bad about yourselves? You lash out at other people.
Right.
So this was my fear about Juneteenth. Of course, I think we should have a day. This is why I think Martin Luther King Day is important.
Yes.
Because he was an important man. I think celebrating the freedom of slaves is an important day, and I don't know why we never had that before with the Emancipation Proclamation. But the way they're squeezing, like you said, the Trojan horse, with this Juneteenth, with the CRT, with the Black Lives Matter all at the same time, they're creating such divide that I'm worried that we never really saw a lot of white supremacist, Ku Klux Klan stuff. We just read about it in history.
Right.
I'm afraid that this is going to create that again. Yeah. That's my fear.
Yeah. And like Brian touched on, I mean, MLK, and some people have challenged me this in the comments section as well. It's like, well, Cedric, don't you believe in what MLK believed in? Yes, well, the whole civil rights movement, that was about voting. Okay, it gave blacks the right to vote.
And not only that, but also so they couldn't not go to a restaurant. They didn't have to sit on the back of a bus.
Right, exactly. But the crux of it was the voting.
Yes.
And from that stemmed equal opportunity, not equal outcome. Right. And that's what CRT, BLM, that's what they're pushing. They want, and we've said this before numerous times, you cannot create an opportunity for a group of people without systematically creating a disadvantage for another group of people. Give me the same opportunity that Brian has. Let me start from the same starting line that he has. And if I come out of the blocks and I fall flat on my face, so be it. I just want the same chance. I don't want a 30-yard head start. I don't want Brian to have a 30-yard head start. I want to start from the same place that he does. And I'm faster than Brian anyway. But my personal story and what I want to say about this is that it's about changing your legacy. And a shout out to a good friend of mine, Jamie Luce. I've been following her podcast lately. It's about creating a legacy and changing the way you think for your family. When my dad came here from Mississippi, he came here from Mississippi because back then he said, "Cedric, there's nothing for a black man to do in Mississippi except there's no industry there." So he joined the military and he came out here to California, and that's where he met my mom in California, who had came out here from Alabama. They got together, and not to go a lot into their detail, but I'm the reason they got married. Okay, because my dad is right there, and she's like, "Oh, guess what?" And 9 months later, out I came. My dad had a choice. My dad could have been like every single other man that he knew who was in his circle of influence of people that he knew, including my paternal grandfather, his dad, to up and leave and say, "You know what? I don't want any part of this." But he's told me numerous times, he goes, I hadn't, it was my job now. For some reason, I knew I was going to have a son, and I had to break that chain of not having family around. And he stuck it, and my parents, by the grace of God, are still married to this day, 54 years later. My son is engaged now because, and for those who don't know my story, I am divorced from the mother of my children, but I am still an active member of my kids' lives. And sometimes the marriage doesn't work out, but doesn't mean you can't be a positive impact player in the life of your kids. And now my son is engaged to be married next summer, and he asked me to go to a men's retreat with him next week because he's like, "Dad, I just want to learn all I can about being a good dad, being a good father." Those were conscious choices made by my father and me and my son. And that's all you have to do. That's what breaks that chain, breaks that legacy, because we've thrown these numbers out a number of times. 70% of blacks now are born to fatherless homes. Mm-hmm. And we told you that 9% of them in the fatherless homes, they drop out of high school, and 22% will end up being incarcerated. And they always want to blame the white man.
Yeah, they want to blame systemic racism for that. And then we talk about the numbers before the 60s, and there was only 20% born out of
only
wedlock.
20% were in the 60s born out of wedlock.
So when there was actual racism, the family unit was strong in the black community.
And a lot of people, and I've heard other black friends of mine who have said this, that there's they're mentally stuck now because of the slavery. Your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents went through that. You didn't go through that. When you're a police officer, you're a fireman, and you have a tragic thing that happens, they have you go through counseling. Because you went through it. Because you're a police officer and you wear a uniform, but if you've never been through anything, the counseling doesn't help you because you didn't personally go through it. So slavery does not have an effect on me because I never experienced it. It wasn't slavery and it wasn't Jim Crow that decimated the black family. It was the convenience of the welfare system. That's what decimated the black family and continues to this day.
Yeah. And so let's bring it back. Juneteenth. Celebrate it. Good thing, bad thing?
In theory, it is a good thing. It is good to celebrate the emancipation of slavery so that we are all created equal and that we can all have equal opportunity in this country of ours.
And then do you think that June 19th is the important date or January 1st is the important date?
January 1st is the important date.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like I said earlier in our video, the day I found out I was going to be a father, great. The day I became a father, that's the day I celebrate.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the point, though. Maybe the day you thought you found out you're gonna be a father is January 1st, but the day you became a father is June 19th.
Yeah. Yes.
You can look at it both ways.
That's
right?
true.
Okay.
That's true.
What do you guys think? Do you think, obviously, anybody who thinks that it's just a bad thing to celebrate, you may have to check your racism.
Say that again, Brian, because I don't want to hear any stupid comment. Here, listen to the white man say this again.
If anybody thinks that it's not good to celebrate when the slaves were freed, check yourself and check if you might be racist. But I understand your concerns because I see the way if they did this maybe back when Obama was president or before, or when Trump suggested it, it wouldn't be mixed in with this critical race theory and it wouldn't be mixed in with this Black Lives Matter. Being mixed in with that is making it divisive for good or bad. So I'm hoping that we can get above that, celebrate, and we'll do it on the 19th, great, because that's what we've decided now. On June 19th, when the last slaves found out that they were emancipated, let's celebrate it, but let's not put it in with the critical race theory and the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think that's going to give it a negative connotation.
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you, white man. Appreciate that. We wanted to share that. It's hot in here. We and Brian, we haven't been in front of the camera in a while. We do have a comment we want to share.
Yeah, let me read the comment here.
Okay.
I'm going to read the comment we're actually going to do because it kind of fits what we were talking about. But Cedric found a funny one first. Why don't you read that one? Can you read the nasty comments right there?
Oh, yes. I don't know if this is a compliment or not. If those you don't know, last week or 2 weeks ago, we did a nasty comments video where we kind of let you take a look behind the scenes at the comments that people leave us.
The nasty ones, the ones where they don't like us very much.
But this one I got excited from the first word because it says subbed, followed by 2 exclamation points. Been looking for an ignorant channel to follow. I'm like, but I'm thinking at least we got the sub. That's great.
So thank you. Was it not as lean, still as mean?
Yeah, something like that.
Thank you. Not as lean, still as mean. But the one I wanted to read, it's by Look Away, right here, and it kind of goes to what I was just talking about. He simply says, CRT creates racists of every color and divides all, and I couldn't agree more with that.
Right.
Because again, everybody who keeps fighting us on this, and if you go through our comments, you'll see all these people, giving Cedric a hard time for this. Critical race theory is not teaching the history. I agree. We need to teach all of the warts and all the bad stuff in history that has happened in America. But remember, it's happened throughout history in every civilization. But you cannot teach it from the perspective that when you were born, you're an oppressor. When you were born, you're a victim. Because that is not going to help anybody.
Right. It's all a damn shame.
But don't forget, we are both wearing our camo hats today. Yes. And these went over really good in Nashville. People always came up, they said, hey, what's Cedric and Brian? They like the hat.
Yes.
So remember, right here, and one of our listeners, Ed, he got hand-delivered his hat. That's not going to happen to everybody, but he happened to be in the right area. But get your hats. You can still use the code CNB10 for 10% off.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, we thank you guys for watching. Like I said, Brian is back in town, so hopefully our videos coming up will be more timely and things are going on in real time. But we appreciate you guys sticking with us. We are growing by leaps and bounds, and we have you to thank for that.
And Tom. Thanks, Tom.
And Tom McDonald, big time. That's been awesome. But make sure you guys make sure you subscribe, make sure you ring that bell, and share our videos with everyone you know. And please be good to each other. Until next time, I'm Cedric.
And I'm Brian. See you later.